Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We got that middle of the week going here. Welcome to the Event Hustler Show. My name is Liz King Caruso. And as always, very excited to be here and have these great industry conversations. Today, I get to be joined by Ryan Byrne from Buzzcast. Ryan, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I know I was just saying the last time you and I were on StreamYard together, you had snow in the background, there was skiing happening. And we were just talking about how it's still just snowed by you. And then it's like 90 degrees here in New York.
Yeah, got 4 inches yesterday, but I'm up at about 9,000 feet up in the mountains of Utah. Wow. So that happens occasionally in the middle of summer or middle of nowhere.
Yeah, my gosh. The weather has been crazy here too. It's just like up and down. So you never know. But Ryan, thank you so much for joining. I wanted people to kind of get to know you. I learned about Buzzcast last year, towards the end of last year, and started to look at your website. I have told everyone I know that you guys have like the best intro video on your website of anyone that I've seen. So people should go check that out. And I've been learning kind of about Buzzcast over the past few months, and I want other people to know about it. So before we get into Buzzcast and everything that you guys are doing, can you just tell our listeners, and we do have some live watchers already, a little bit about you and your background and kind of what brings you to Buzzcast?
Yeah, and that's a lot of that. Also sets up a lot about kind of what Buzzcast is as well, and why we're doing what we're doing. So I come from a deep production background. I'm a director by trade. You know, I've directed movies and a bazillion spots and that sort of stuff in my life. And I've had a production company called the Buzz Lab for the past 15 years. We produce a lot of the content and also some event stuff for a lot of the biggest tech companies in the world. So we work with Oracle and Adobe and eBay, PayPal and PwC and Hulu and all kind of large enterprise clients like that, producing a big range of content and event related stuff for them. And so I now have somebody else running that company, full time, and I stepped away and hired in a new leader for that a couple of years ago and started to look at other ways to expand or go into new territory with what we were doing. And out of that, I was looking at some technology that my now partner has around interactive video, and we were looking at ways to put that into the marketplace and the customer base that I know well when COVID hit. And all of a sudden we looked at, we had these couple pieces in front of us and said, oh, wow, we already have most of the technology and the pieces in place to solve a problem that was obviously coming at me and everybody else, but my clients in particular were hitting me up and saying, Ryan, what do we do now about this? And so we quickly spun up an MVP starting in March of last year, and then we started doing events by June, July type territory last year. So That's kind of how it got started. And I think, the main takeaway from that is really, from the very beginning, we've set out with a very specific mission, which is to solve the problem that production companies like my production company and other sort of high-level production companies out there have. So we were trying to build the professional-grade virtual event platform, the platform that large enterprise clients can use for large, often complicated events. And so that was the sort of side of the market we always set out to do, was to kind of solve the problem that we knew we would have and that we knew other, people that are in our industry and in our position would have. So that was kind of the mission from the beginning, was to build that sort of pro-grade event platform.
So tell us about the solution. What is Buzzcast for people who may not have heard about it?
Sure. It's a virtual event platform, obviously. And, but it focuses a lot on a few kind of main areas, which if people watch the video, it's covered a little bit in there. But some of the big areas are, things like scalability. Our system is built on AWS serverless technology from the ground up. So it's built to be able to handle, we've done events with hundreds of thousands of people. It can go up to millions of people, and it can scale down quite a bit from there. So it's built in a very robust way. It's also built so that we're using, redundant streams and backups and a whole bunch of other things like that in the background, because we're dealing with events that, can't go down. So we're not popping in a Vimeo live, feed into our thing. this is a broadcasting system that we built. This is meant for you. We can stand up cable channels with this if we want to. And the core tech under it has been used, to do thousands of concerts and sporting events and that sort of thing in the past that we've now kind of transferred into event space. And then, other things like security is very important to us and our clients. We're dealing with things like doing the Gates Foundation's annual event, or working with Anthem Blue Cross's annual investor report things where they have to be secure and they can't go down.
Right.
So we've built our system in a way that is harder to build, but ultimately creates it so that it's much more protected than most systems out there would be. There's some nerdy tech stuff we can talk about there if we want to, but but essentially, things like that. And then also on the sort of how we built the system side, it's built to be very flexible, so it can be very customized. When we're building platforms, we're building, this company's platform that they're going to use over and over again, and so they want it to look like their platform, not ours, and that needs to be more than just swapping out a logo or things like that. So our system is built to be a bit more flexible in that. And it also, in addition, we're also working with companies where we often, we have a team from our side that's actually working with them and working with their production partner and with their AV partner on the production. So it's a little bit more involved of a process. It's not a self-service, do-it-yourself type approach.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things, like, I think in 2020, when COVID first hit, just like you mentioned, everyone is panicked. They're starting to think about what they're going to do. And one thing I've noticed, and my audience knows about me, I'm a very DIY person. You just kind of jump in. You're like, okay, what are we going to do? We have to figure this out. And I saw a lot of planners doing the same thing. I'm sure you saw on LinkedIn, almost every event planner was putting up like virtual event expert and just trying to like figure it out. But I do think dramatically that has changed in the last year, where people have really started to step back and say, wait, we used to always hire production companies for our in-person events. Like, why are we not doing that now? So the larger companies that you're talking about, that you're working with, a lot of our audience has those clients. But even, I know for ourselves, like, smaller clients are also thinking, we need to take this more seriously if we're going to have a long-term virtual or hybrid plan. So are you seeing those trends that people are starting to think kind of more professionally about scalability and security, or do you wish more planners were thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see something. We've been seeing a lot of that from the beginning, just by the nature of who we're dealing with. The type of companies we're dealing with aren't going to dive in and just Uber's not going to dive in and just do it themselves, sort of thing. They have, I mean, most of these companies have large or established internal production teams, but most of the time those production teams, just as they do an in-person for anything that's a larger event, they're basically working with an external production team and kind of coordinating, and there's enough work to go around there on the creative and all the details that we all know go into events, which are just ever changing and never ending. And so, I think from that regard, we've been seeing what you're referring to kind of in our space from the beginning, but I do think that we're starting to see more of that coming to fruition, especially as we start getting back into hybrid events and things like that. Again, we're gonna be doing that, but I think that when you're talking about events that need to be a professional grade and need to feel like more than just, we're peeking in on a Zoom call, and need to be higher level production, then of course we need to bring in professionals and there needs to be teams involved to do some of that work.
Yeah, of course. And so let's just go back to like March of last year, when you started seeing everything that's happening and you kind of have these products sitting in front of you. You're looking at the events industry. From my experience, a lot of times when that's kind of the path where they have like part of a product and then they just think like, oh, we could sell this to the events industry. It's not that targeted, and it ends up being like hard to market and clunky for event planners to use. But I know just from what I've seen of Buzzcast that that's not the case. So how did you guys go about figuring out that the events industry is where this makes the most sense to use these tools, and then to make something that works really well? I mean, obviously there's a lot of overlap between event production and TV production and other kinds of production. But it's still different beasts, right? Like, you're producing a show is very different than a live event that happens for 3 hours and is over. So what are some of those things that you guys thought about?
Well, I think really for us, it was just purely coming out of having to solve our own problem. And, as a production company working with those types of clients, like we needed something different. And so it really kind of came out of that. And, most of the events we do are oftentimes, multiple day, hundreds of sessions, thousands of people, that sort of thing. And so there are just a different set of problems you have to deal with when you're talking about that. When you're just talking about a single stream we're hopping on like you and I are right now to talk for 30 minutes or even for 3 hours, whatever it may be, it's kind of a single line you're dealing with. When you're starting to talk about events where there may be 14 different choices of things you can go to right now, and there may be 9 different ticket types, like where, hey, this is a ticket type for the press because the press can go to the sessions, but they're not allowed to chat, or they're not allowed to access the directory, or here's a group of people that are in an advisory board meeting and only they have access and can see that. So when you start getting into these larger groups of people and you want them all on the event at the same time, but you want them to have different experiences, that's where you start getting to more of the type of stuff that we're focused on doing. Mm-hmm. And so those were the types of problems we were setting out to solve from the beginning, is how do you handle that in a way that doesn't feel confusing and people are just lost and don't know where to go and just have a bad experience.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the best, is when you're solving your own problem. Yeah. You can kind of, whether it's working or not. And then everyone else who has the same problems, ideally it works as well for them as for anyone else. So as you're kind of, you've done the last year of all these great events on the platform, do you have any trends that you're seeing of things that these bigger events are thinking about as it comes to what they want to do in the future with virtual and or hybrid? Anything they're doing like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's surprising to anybody that, one of the main things continues to be, how do we get people to connect in a real way? I mean, especially at larger events, that becomes even more important because, they want to figure out how do you make it not feel like I'm just watching one person? How do I actually get some level of connection? And I think that's the name of the game. Certainly what we're focused on overall, not just in terms of what are your networking tools. I mean, that's certainly a part of it, but for us, it's also kind of what I was just talking about before. How do we help connect you to what you need to be connected to, whether that's content, whether that's people, whatever that form that may take. And so, especially for larger events, that's, I think, even amplified even more. But I think that's across the board what I don't think this is probably surprising for you to hear, or surprising anybody to hear at this point.
Yeah, that engagement piece is so important. And I think a lot of people feel like it's hard to do in virtual, especially because people have been kind of bombarded by virtual tech for the last year. Are you seeing any brands or clients that are doing interesting things to get people like engaged and connecting with each other beyond what you're talking about, where there's like a personalized experience and polling and chats and all that stuff that everyone has, but anything unique that people are doing?
That we're seeing on ours. Let's see. I mean,
and of course, I didn't prep you for any of these questions. So
no worries. I mean, certainly one thing we see a lot of in ours is, the desire of event planners to organize people into groups to say like, hey, you're going to be at this table, or you're going to be in this group, and we want to assign them to that. And so we've built some stuff so that event organizers can actually do that, where they can in advance say, hey, you're going to go into this group. We're putting you with these 6 people because we know we want you to connect with these guys. So we're seeing that a lot, especially with, some investor or fundraising things and events like that, where they kind of have, or internal ones where they want to set groups. So we're definitely seeing some of that. We've had to build some tools to make that an easier process, so it's not a big mess. That's something we're seeing. I'm trying to think of other unique things beyond some of the networking stuff that you've talked about. I think overall there's a long way to go for everybody. We're at the beginning of this, and we're all figuring out a lot of stuff. For us, it's just really about how do you make that experience more streamlined for the user? How do you get them where they need to be? How do you connect them to what they need to be connected to in a seamless way?
Yeah. Do you have any kind of exciting things? I know all products are moving very fast. You've talked already about kind of you're developing this and you're working on other things. Anything that's coming down the pipeline that you want to share with people yet, or, anything you want to kind of give people a heads up on?
Yes, coming down the pipeline. I don't think we're quite ready to
Sure.
share yet because we're working on some cool stuff. So yeah, there are some feature type stuff that's coming out. I think what we've been spending the most amount of time on, certainly since the start of this year, has really been just a lot of non-sexy back end stability, security, just things to make our system bulletproof and to try to really make sure that we can be the ones that are counted on when your event needs to not go down and you need to make sure it's high quality and solid and everything's going to go right. That first and foremost is the most important thing to us and to the types of clients we depend on. So we've been doing a lot of heavy back end stuff that's going on to kind of make sure that now that we've built a lot of the system and the system's been up and operating for a while, to make sure it's just really rock solid. And then now we're moving into more of the kind of fun feature thing, or more of what you see on the front end where you go, oh, that's a cool way to do that. So a little bit different is sort of what our focus has been for the last bit of time. We're not as focused on being in a sort of sparkly feature race with everybody. We're focused on sort of kind of some of the core tools of how you do this well and how you do this at a professional level.
Now, you talked a little bit about the scalability, security. Are there things that you feel like, obviously there's a lot that you're focused on to build that kind of back end structure. On the planner side or on the host side, what are some of the things you're seeing that are important in regards to that? I think, for example, we did a session on cybersecurity at a recent event, and just thinking, I remember Brant Kruger, he said, hackers and things, they're not looking for like the main source, they're looking for side doors, and events are the side doors. It's like we are the easy entry into all this mine of data. What are some of the things you guys are seeing from your side that are either mistakes people are making or just things people should be watching for that you're trying to bulletproof your way out of?
On that side of stuff, certainly. Security is one of them. We rebuilt our entire system to be, this can get a little nerdy, but single tenant, which basically means the vast majority of platforms of any kind, not just in this industry, are generally built to be multi-tenant, meaning there's a core to them, and then they're spinning out this event for this person, this event for this person, but it's all kind of coming from a central place, right? When we do it, which is tougher to build and a little bit trickier to maintain in some ways, but when we are spinning up, say, the Gates Foundation instance, it is their own instance of streaming and all and database and all the tools. Everything is completely disconnected. There's nothing that connects back to a central base for us. And in that way, we can take that. And then in certain cases, that event being a good example, we then brought in another security company who wrapped that in another layer, and we're doing monitoring during the event because that was obviously a very high profile. We had, heads of state from all over the world and all the top doctors in the world and things like that going on. And so it just allows us to do some things like that. So there's definitely some things there when you're talking about events where that matters, that people need to be careful and look out for. I think on other areas of things that I think people are needing to kind of pay attention to. Let's see. I think when it comes to the setup and the organization of an event, right? You're talking about sort of event planners. Where we focus a lot on is trying to make it so that, you can have control over what people are seeing, what they have access to, how they flow through the event. And there's a lot of sort of behind the scenes tech that goes into that to sort of associate certain things with certain ticket types and to do all that type of work. But that's something that we hear over and over again from event planners, especially again, as you move into larger events, because they want to have that control. They want to have the ability to shrink down the event for the people going to it. It's, you go to just one giant thing, and then it's hard to find what you want to find, and you just feel like, oh, what am I? I'm just going to sit here and watch this event for 8 hours a day for 3 days. No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that's one thing that we hear over and over again from event planners is giving more ability to control the journey for viewers.
Yeah. So Teresa says, get nerdy, Ryan. Tech nerd here. Our audience is definitely very tech nerdy. So don't worry about that. But I do think a lot of planners not only should be, but are starting to really think more about that attendee journey and what that looks like. Not just getting into the platform, which is something definitely you have to think about, is getting your attendees to understand what you're using, how to use it, and all that stuff. But really, and everyone was talking about this with in-person events, the personalization of that journey. The welcome having their name on it, the little details and the big details and the very complex details that make the event feel like this was meant for me. And I do see more and more organizers who are trying to do the curated groups like you're talking about. We were just talking about doing an event where you kind of sign up as a cohort, you get assigned as a cohort, and you have a different program than people in a different cohort. And I know people do that in all different kinds of ways, but I think it makes a lot of sense to just give people a different experience. And
we do a lot of that. Yeah. And there's oftentimes, especially when you have different outside groups that are coming in that maybe, they can access this part of the event, but the rest of this is our internal stuff. Like maybe we want to have a section where we want to allow external participants to come in, but then we also want to have our internal meeting, or somewhere internal. So a lot of situations like that would come up. Another thing you just brought up there before is, getting people onto the platform. I mean, that's something that I think us and everybody else spends a lot of time on. And it's a tricky one, because when you're dealing with these types of events, we're often dealing with, large banks or hospitals or, education. We just did one that was, 8,000 elementary school children and their teachers from all these school systems. And you can imagine, how those types of systems shut down and block things. And so one of the things that we find is when when we're working with a client, we really have to have a plan. There really has to be some people involved in that process. Put together a plan of how you're going to solve that in advance of the event. Because what you don't want to do is open your event up and then all of a sudden find out that 2,000 people have a VPN that's blocking their company from entering the event. And so we've been finding we have to do a lot of footwork in advance to identify, hey, is there a big group of people coming from this financial institution? Okay, well, let's get somebody from that institution to go on our testing page and make sure they can actually access. And if not, then let's get them whitelisted or do some of that work, because end of the day, you can't unlock it. We can't, you got to have somebody unlock the door from the inside if that's where it's locked from. And it's, an unfortunate thing that we all have to deal with, because streaming and video is the very first thing that any of these systems will block, especially in a work environment. So you just got to be, in our view, got to be organized. And that's where some of the hand holding and sort of taking people through the process has to come in place well before the event.
Yeah, that's the fun work. All the very detailed. So you mentioned earlier, that you're working with clients who they're kind of building this is their platform. They want everything to look really branded. Are you seeing that some of these bigger brands are doing, there's a lot of talk in the events industry about this 365 community, or this idea that they're doing all their events on the same platform and they're using micro events to connect people between the bigger events. Are you seeing that? Or is it kind of like, in person where it's like the one hit a year and then they come back next year to do it again?
I mean, I think it's one of these things where it's clearly probably the right way to go for some clients. I don't think it's a thing for every company or everybody, but I think there's certainly ones where you've got an association or you've got a group, or, one of my oldest clients from my production company is Magento, which is a, open source e-commerce platform. And there's a huge community around there that kind of live and die and breathe Magento. And so certain situations like that, I think that is the right way to go. And I certainly think that it'll work a lot better than what we've been trying to do, which is we basically said, let's take this in-person event we had planned out, let's pick it up and slap it on a screen, and we're still going to do our 4 days for 8 hours a day, and nobody wants to do that online. So I do think we have to spread these things out, have something where it's more of a tuning thing. I think it has to be the right situation. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations about it. It's certainly the type of thing that, you know, our type of platform is kind of built to do. And, you know, but I think we haven't quite gotten there yet in terms of people actually executing on it. Because it's not just the platform. It really comes down to an internal shift in your content strategy.
Yeah.
Company. They've got to really be thinking in terms of how are we going to do that? And you have to get their internal events team to start shifting their ideas from how they were doing it into, okay, let's do a more paced out, you know, we're going to essentially post or do these little tuning moments all the time. And I think we got to make some of that shift. So I think it's going to have to be led by some of those teams to be willing to do that.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to happen just because, as you said, instead of 4 days of 8-hour content, people are not going to sit through it. So you're either going to eliminate a lot of it or figure out different ways to, and virtual, I mean, you don't have to fly everyone into a location. It gives you the ability to tease some content and stretch things out. We did our Pivot Summit last year for 2 weeks, but it was just 2 hours a day. Yeah, and exactly. You know, I always say, like, we could never do that in person. Who would fly to New York to sit through 2 hours of content for 2 weeks? It would never work. Yeah. But, yeah, I'll be interested to see if more and more brands start kind of picking that up and really building this year-round content strategy.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of powerful stuff that can come out of that too, because you know, in the traditional, you know, world before all this happened, when we're often the ones producing all the content, like everything that goes up on a screen for a very large, like for eBay or something like that. We're producing all the product launch videos and all the, you know, here's a customer success story or here's a new announcement we're doing, right? And the way it's worked in the past is they cram all that into one giant event because it's so expensive to get people out there. Yeah. So everything kind of folks, we end up producing 70% of the content we produce for a client for the whole year around their big annual event. And I think that one of the things that doesn't do well is it doesn't give, you end up with all these product launches and all these things all at once that don't necessarily get their due time or their due focus. And I think some of this stuff will allow us to spread some of those things out. You do an event just for a particular, say, product launch where you can pull in a whole audience of people from around the world that really care about that and are really focused on that. Whereas before it was a piece of the pie that was all slammed together and kind of hard for people to put their attention on.
Yeah, no, there's huge benefits. And, you know, brand loyalty is what all these companies are looking for. And if you're in contact with them more often, you know, what's going to happen, right? So what other, is there anything else about Buzzcast in particular that you want people to know, or anything you want, like, let's say a planner is watching right now, they're very interested in learning more. We haven't talked about like all the little nuts and bolts. So I've encouraged people to go check out the video on the website, but what do you want people to know? How do you want them to contact you, and where should they go and all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So I think we've talked about a lot of the big core things of what we're focused on, the type of events we do. I mean, that's what we do. The platform is also very robust in its feature offering. We have a pretty wide range of features and offerings, from doing sponsor booths and doing posters and doing lounges and a whole bunch of things like that. So it's a pretty broad offering that you can basically turn off and turn on things for different events. So it's very flexible in that way. So it can be sort of customized quite a bit to what is contained in it. It's not just, here's the wrapper, here's what you get, and this is the options you get to use. Ours kind of has a larger offering that you can kind of pick and choose from. So that's an important thing. In terms of contacting us, you can, I don't know if it's, do I just say out the email? Or?
We're going to put it, so verbally say it, and then we'll put it in our recaps.
Yeah, I mean, you can find us on buzzcast.com, and there's a contact form there, which is probably the easiest way not to forget it. Or you can reach out. We'll put some, I guess, info in here about some of the specific people on our team that you can reach out to if you want to get going on a demo and see some of that type of stuff. We're happy to show people around for that. And past that, we're just if you have a larger event or a larger enterprise client that has the type of needs that they have, we should probably be one of your first stops.
Yeah, awesome.
If you're looking for more of a self-service, do-it-yourself thing, that's not really what we've where our focus is.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great to know. Well, I wish you the best of luck. I know you guys are working really hard behind the scenes trying to keep up and improve all the time. It was great chatting with you, and hopefully we'll continue to stay in touch.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, and great chatting with you and everybody else who's listening in.
Awesome. All right, everyone. We will see you next week for another episode of the Event Hustler Show. If you missed it live, you will be able to catch us on our podcast and on our blog and in all those good social media places. And we hope to see you live next week. Thanks, everyone.